what we'll be discussing is your Indian naval ships. So the largest ships that are actually part of any country's navy, they are your aircraft carriers. Now, an aircraft carrier is nothing but a floating airbase which is capable of carrying, deploying, arming, and even recovering aircrafts. So an aircraft carrier is nothing but a seafaring airbase. Now, an aircraft carrier is actually very strategic and very important for the progress of any country's navy. The reason being that with the help of an aircraft carrier, the navy of any country will have its own air force. The navy itself will have its own air force rather than depending upon the traditional air force of the country. So imagine a large ship, okay, with a runway on the ship along with fighter jets, so that fighter jets are able to take off the ship in the middle of a warfare and assist in an ongoing war. Okay. So aircraft carriers are very, very important. So as of today, India only has one particular aircraft carrier, and that is INS Vikramaditya, whereas the two previous aircraft carriers have been decommissioned. The first aircraft carrier to have been inducted into the Indian Armed Force is your INS Vikrant. So INS Vikrant was actually purchased from UK. It was purchased from UK in the year 1990. Sorry, in the year 1957. In the year 1957, INS Vikrant was purchased by UK. This particular aircraft carrier was developed for World War II, but was never used since World War II came to an end. Later, it was purchased by India, and it was used all the way until 1997, and it was decommissioned in the year 1997. There was a big battle, no legal battle, and all should INS Vikrant should be used as a museum, etc., etc. But ultimately, it was actually what do you say? Broken down and separated. Even your Bajaj V Vikrant bike and all initially had metal which was taken from INS Vikrant, hence the name Bajaj V or Bajaj Vikrant. Fine. So the second one, which was actually purchased by India, is INS Virat. Now, INS Virat was also purchased from UK. Now, the funny thing is that INS Virat was used by UK for a long time, and INS Virat was actually decommissioned by UK. The English people, the English said that this particular aircraft carrier is very old and it can no longer be used. So they decommissioned it. They decommissioned it in 1984. 3 years later, India said in 1987, Parvagila nam kodi nav use martivi anta. 3 years later, we purchased it in 1987, an aircraft carrier which was decommissioned by UK 3 years earlier. And we purchased this and we used it until 2017. I think very recently, once again, it was on, there was an ongoing legal battle where people were claiming that once again this should also be made a museum. Okay, but again, that apart, that's a different story. And finally, we have INS Vikramaditya. Now, Vikramaditya was purchased from Russia. This also same story. Okay, Russia used this particular aircraft carrier for a very long time. And in 1996, Russians said this particular aircraft carrier is very old, and hence they decommissioned it. 8 years later, in 2004, we said to Russia, "Namak kotbidi anta parvagilla, we'll use the second hand anta." Once after its decommission, and 8 years later, India once again purchased this aircraft carrier, and today INS Vikramaditya is the sole aircraft carrier that is functioning and is running and is with India even today. So imagine, it was decommissioned in 1996 and now it is 2021 and we are still using it. And this is the only running aircraft carrier with the Indian Navy. Fine. Now, see, the strength of any country's navy is actually determined by the number of aircraft carriers you have in some parlance, at least. Okay, not the actual strength, but at least in some parlance. And if you take the American Navy. Okay, there is absolutely no navy in the entire world that can actually match America's naval power. Why? Because if you add the deck space of a ship, if you take the deck space of all American aircraft carriers and add it up, okay, this will be more than the total deck space of aircraft carriers of all the countries in the world. So what am I trying to tell you? If you take this deck space of all the aircraft carriers in the world, add it, that is not enough to match the deck space of the aircraft carriers of USA alone. Okay, so there's absolutely no match to USA's naval power. So this is the reason why Russia, China, now even India is indigenously trying to boost its navy by indigenously trying to develop and build aircraft carriers, and China is doing that because because it wishes or wants to match USA's naval power in the South China Sea. Okay, so apart from USA, if my knowledge is correct, no other country has more than one aircraft carrier as of now. I might be wrong, but I think my information is correct. Apart from USA, as of today, no other country has more than one aircraft carrier. If not for China, if China has recently uh, uh, developed more. Okay, so I told you earlier that India is now trying to indigenously manufacture aircraft carriers. So if you see here, okay, so this is India's aircraft carrier. Okay, so this is your new INS Vikrant, which is actually being built in Kochi, in Kerala. So as of now in 2021, it is almost built. It has been completely built and it is being checked. So the Navy is testing it for operation and usability. And once the testing is done, it should be inducted into the naval force. Okay. No, no. INS Vikrant itself. INS Vishal is a super carrier. INS Vishal is a super carrier. So this is INS Vikrant, a new INS Vikrant that they are building, and it is mostly completed. It is mostly completed. Maybe next year or by this year end, this should be inducted. So you can see this. This is more than 200 meters in length. See, I'm pretty sure which building. Fine. See, for example, take this building over here. Take this building over here. This building over here should be as big as your school or college that you studied in. So compare that school or college size and compare it with that Air Force carrier here, all the way from here to here. So an aircraft carrier is almost like a floating town itself. It's like a small city itself. It is that big. It is that big. But still, India does not have super carriers, whereas USA has super carriers, and super carriers are even more massive, having a displacement of more than 60,000 tons. But still, we are trying to indigenously develop, and we are one of the few nations who now have the ability to indigenously manufacture, build, and construct an aircraft carrier. So this is the new INS Vikrant that we have built. So India has also proposed INS Vishal, where INS Vishal will be a super carrier. INS Vishal will be a super carrier. Now, this itself cost us close to $3 billion. Okay, $3 billion is how much? Like 21,000 crore rupees. And INS Vishal will definitely be more than that. So you can see here. Okay, you can just compare. So here we have USA, and you can compare USA's size with that of India's INS Vikramaditya. So US's aircraft is twice the size of India's aircraft carrier. So these are just a diagram which actually compares the aircraft carriers of various nations. Fine. So the largest ship that any navy owns will always be the aircraft carrier. Following that, we have the cruiser, destroyer, frigate, and a corvette, where the size decreases in descending order. So the next largest ship is always a cruiser. Now, cruiser is meant for long expeditions, whereas destroyer is actually used for actual fighting on waters. Now, whenever an aircraft carrier goes out into the sea, an aircraft carrier is never sent out alone. Why? Because it is very expensive and it has to be protected at all costs. Therefore, an aircraft carrier will always be accompanied by cruisers and destroyers in order to protect the aircraft carrier and also carry out this battle on waters. Whereas frigate and corvettes are really small in comparison, and they are mostly used for agility and maneuverability. Okay, so you also have cruiser, destroyer, frigate, and corvette. Next, submarines. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone understands what's a submarine, and you don't. I don't think you need an explanation as to what is a submarine. But can anyone tell me how is it that a submarine is able to dive inside into water and also rise up to the surface? So, for example, this is a surface water, and you'd have seen images, right? You'd have seen images of submarines rising to the surface like this. Correct? This is a submarine, for example. How does a submarine manage to dive into water, into deep waters? And how is it able to rise up to the surface? It is by making use of ballast tanks. Okay, so what happens is, in simple terms, a submarine will have huge tanks inside, will actually have huge tanks inside. So whenever a submarine wants to dive into deep waters, it will take in water from the surrounding, fill in the ballast tanks with water so that the density of the entire submarine increases, and therefore it is able to dive into deep waters. When it wishes to rise to the surface, all the water from the ballast tanks will be expelled out, because of which the density now reduces and hence the submarine is able to rise to the surface. So this is how a submarine is able to rise up to the surface. Now, the thing is that submarines are basically used for strategic reasons. Okay, one, of course, you can and you may use a submarine in an ongoing warfare. Okay, but mostly submarines spend most of its time inside water, in deep waters, where it carries out various what do you say, surveillance or intelligence collection, for example. So the main objective of a submarine is always to stay underwater, but you would have seen many times that a submarine rises up to the surface and you're able to see the submarine. The thing is that most of the submarines that are presently used across the world, they are diesel electric submarines. Okay, so they primarily will be making use of a diesel engine to power itself. Now, the thing is that if you are going to make use of a diesel engine, okay, it is nothing but a combustion engine where diesel is burned to produce, where this combustion takes place to produce energy. If combustion is going to take place inside the submarine, for combustion to take place, we need oxygen. Meaning, simply put, we need air. What does that mean? Underwater, if you wish to carry out combustion, the submarine needs to carry oxygen or air along with it. So the problem is that in an ongoing war, for example, when a submarine is running in full capacity, it will only be able to stay underwater for a very small duration. Okay, it cannot even stay underwater for multiple days either. It will have to rise up to the surface, take in air, and once again dive back. Just like a whale, for example, it rises to the surface, breathes in air, and once again dives into deep waters. So this becomes a very big problem for your submarines, because whenever they rise to the surface, they are easily detected and they may be attacked. Therefore, now we have nuclear submarines. What's a nuclear submarine? A nuclear submarine is a submarine which will have a small nuclear reactor, where the submarine is powered by a nuclear reactor. The advantage of this is that if a submarine is powered by a nuclear reactor, it can continue to stay underwater for up to 25 years continuously without having to rise to the surface. Why? Because a nuclear reactor does not require oxygen to operate, and a nuclear reactor, once fueled, can produce continuous amount of energy, continuous power can be produced for 25 years. Therefore, in an ongoing battle, a submarine can stay underwater for a very, very long time. Fine. So in India also we have nuclear submarines. Please remember, we only have classes of nuclear submarines. One is your Chakra class, the other is your Arihant class. Okay, please remember the names. Nuclear submarines, only two: Chakra class and Arihant class. Every other submarine that India owns is generally a diesel electric submarine. Fine. All other submarines, like your Sindhu Ghosh class, they're all, see, so we have several other submarines: Sindhu Ghosh, Sindhu Dwaj, Sindhu Veer, Sindhu Ratna. You don't have to remember the names and all. I'm just showing it here. Okay, we have Shishu Kumar class submarines. They're all diesel electric submarines. Diesel electric submarines. Okay, so this is your Shishu Kumar class, for example. They're all diesel electric submarines. Fine. Next is INS Kalvari. The next submarine that we're discussing is your INS Kalvari. Now, INS Kalvari is known as the Scorpion class submarine, which has been developed through a collaboration between India and France. Between India and France through a project known as Project 75. Here. Okay, so INS Kalvari is a Scorpion class submarine which is used for attack as well as for stealth, and it has been jointly produced by India along with France. So it's basically a French submarine which India is now building in India. Okay, so this is an attack and stealth submarine and also a diesel electric submarine, where INS Kalvari is known as Tiger Shark. So under this Project 75, 6 submarines are going to be manufactured. That is INS Kalvari, INS Khanderi, INS Karanj, INS Vela, INS Wagir, and INS Wagshir. Okay, so all the 6 submarines will be manufactured in India under Project 75. All the 6 submarines are Scorpion class submarines. Okay, please remember, they have been Vela, Wagir, and Wakshir, for example, they have been very recently manufactured and they are going to be inducted into the armed forces. And based on this, since the government was happy with Project 75, we are extending this Project 75 and we are calling it as Project 75I. We are